I fundamentally disagree with Mr. McKinnon that this is not an expense. His words were that this $9 million is not an expense, that $9 million in a cost of living crisis, in a housing crisis in our country, $9 million on a condo for Justin Trudeau's buddy Tom Clark on Billionaire Row, that $9 million is not an expense. Well, was it a gift? Because if it, where did the how did that purchase come to pass? I mean, just absolute fantasy along the lines of budgets balancing themselves. Of course, $9 million is an expense, and it was taken out of Canadians' pockets. It was taxed off of their paychecks.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. That's our friend MP Mike Barrett. He's from Rideau Lakes, Thousand Islands in Ontario, and he's asking questions about a $9 million expense that came out of your tax dollars for a Liberal NDP appointee insider to live large in New York with a very fancy-pantsy zero position. It's outrageous, guys. Let's take a look and listen to what was going on in committee. This happened just yesterday. It's pretty fresh. Another Liberal scandal. I guess it's Wednesday, right? So why wouldn't there be one? This Trudeau has to go. We need an election. Let's take a peek at what Mike Barrett was asking in committee, and the lack of answers, or the answers themselves, are kind of upsetting just to hear. Like, they're giving away our tax dollars, guys, in these times. It's ridiculous.
Thank you very much. We'll start with 6 minutes with Mr. Barrett, please.
So we're asking you these questions today in the context that we live in Canada. That's with housing prices having doubled, rent having doubled, and we have 1 in 4 Canadians saying that they're going to be relying on food banks this fall. And at the same time, we have the Prime Minister's media buddy who gets a well-paid government appointment in New York City, and the existing multi-million-dollar condo is deemed not good enough, and a $9 million luxury condo is purchased for his exclusive use. I'll start with you, Ms. Tattersall. Who signed off on the decision?
So as I said in my opening remarks, the decision was taken under the authority of Global Affairs. So who signed off would have followed the delegation instrument within Global Affairs.
Okay, so from your department, who was the most senior person who touched the file?
So nobody touched the file at Treasury Board Secretariat because the transaction fell within the limits
of $10 million.
Of $10 million. Okay. So the decision was at Global Affairs.
Mr. Quinlan, you're an assistant deputy minister. Who was the most senior person in your department who signed off or touched this file?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The chief appraiser in this case, Madame Shaw, who's accompanying me today, was the most senior person who dealt with this file.
Okay, so we have a 3,600 square foot, 3-bedroom plus studio, 4-bathroom, 4.5 baths, with a pool, his and her salons, paddle court, golf simulator. Was this purchase, in the context that I mentioned about the cost of living crisis that Canadians are facing, was this flagged for the minister? Madame Bouchard, as the most senior person in your department who touched the file, this excessive, this opulent purchase, was this not something that merited the awareness of the minister?
Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for that question. The Chief Appraiser of Canada does not have the mandate to evaluate the merits of a given transaction. or the decision to acquire or dispose of a property. My mandate is simply to take a given address and ensure that it is appraised.
For deciding the value that Canadians get for the purchase, you decide the value of the asset. Who is responsible? And I'm not sure if Treasury Board or if one of you folks would like to respond, but who ultimately is responsible for the value that workers in Western Canada, workers in the prairies, workers in Ontario, Quebec, the Atlantic provinces, what value do they get for this $9 million luxury suite for Justin Trudeau's buddy? Where's the value for Canadian taxpayers here? He was living in a house paid for by the taxpayers.
So if it's helpful to the committee in the examination, I can talk through the principle of best value that sits within the Treasury Board policy.
Okay, so when we're talking about best value, I'm not looking for chapter and verse on what the policy says. What I'm looking for is the practical application of that. So it falls below a threshold of $10 million and therefore doesn't, trigger the need for Treasury Board review, which I think is, that's wild, in this respect. Multi-million-dollar estates not triggering the review of Treasury Board. We've seen at this committee before and others where Liberal members have said that, well, these decisions are all left to bureaucrats. There's absolutely no ministers who are responsible for any of the tens of millions of dollars that get spent. So this is a condo on Billionaires Row in Manhattan. We have government facilities available to the appointee to host meetings that aren't next to his bedroom. So what is the value that Canadians get for this $9 million purchase in Manhattan?
So if it's helpful, I can explain that you only hold real property to serve a program purpose. So there's two aspects, I think, to the questions that you may have. One, which is, what are the programmatic mission requirements that would drive the decision to have an official residence in a specific area? Those are driven by global affairs, and I think in the submission to the committee, they reference their policy that drives those requirements. So real property exists for requirements, and then when they go to acquire, what I would expect to see and what I think this committee would want to hear from global affairs about is, did they undertake a cost, like a full life cycle cost analysis of the different options? Did they look at keeping it and making the upgrades? Did they look at what the full cost would be of acquiring something new, either through a purchase or through a lease? And what was the results of that analysis, and did it show the value? So that's sort of what the Treasury Board policy sets out, and there's two aspects to that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks very much, Mr. Barrett. Mr.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Must be nice to be one of Trudeau's friends. It does not feel very nice to be one of his citizens that do not want him in power anymore. Boy, oh boy, do Canadians ever need an election. They're tossing our tax dollars away with reckless abandon. It's hard to watch and tolerate, but I'm making the videos to show you, because if you don't know, you don't know. But once you see some of this committee stuff, what happens in the House of Commons, you start to figure it out pretty quick. It's very obvious. My name's Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. We're learning all about Canadian federal politics, sharing that with you. This is the spot to get caught up. That's where I started to make the channel, was just getting caught up and showing Canadians what I was finding out. Like, share, subscribe, get notified. Please leave a comment. I love the comments. That's it. We'll catch you next video. There are more scandals coming, I assure you. I wish there weren't, but I assure you there's more coming. We'll catch you in the next video.